I had gotten an anonymous message on Instagram. This person messaged me privately saying, "Hey, before it's too late, please don't get married to this guy. He used to abuse my friend physically. I married him anyway." And I learned that the warning message didn't even begin to tell the truth. The man I married, the man who seemed so perfect, wasn't just abusive. He was a monster. And I was not his only wife. This is the story of how I married that monster. And how the warning message came too late. It is a story of calculated deception, survival, and escape that you have to hear to believe. If you are ready for this journey, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. Let's begin. The story begins when I was 21 years old. It felt, in many ways, like an ending. I had just graduated from college, finishing a little earlier than most, and found myself back in North Dakota, suspended in a strange, quiet limbo. The path that was supposed to stretch out before me, clear and defined, was instead a complete haze. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. The looming question, the one that hung in the air at every family dinner, was medical school, or nursing school, or any school that ended with a respectable degree. I did not know if I wanted any of it. To fill the empty days and quiet the anxious hum in my mind, I found a job. I was working at the hospital, inside a psych facility. The irony was not lost on me. I spent my days in a place of contained crisis while feeling entirely lost in my own. I felt like a profound disappointment. My family had expectations, and I was failing to meet them. This failure had a tangible rhythm. I was taking the MOT over and over again. Each attempt was a new mountain of study, and each result was the same quiet letdown. The pressure was immense, a weight I carried with me from the moment I woke up. I was also navigating a deep, unnamed heartache. It was not just one thing, but an accumulation of things. In my community, I had no one. I had no close girlfriends, no one to turn to when the weight became too much. The idea of speaking to my mother or my father about the complicated, messy feelings of relationships or my own crushing uncertainty was unthinkable. It simply was not done. So, I existed in this fog. I was going through a period of intense emotional swings, a constant roller coaster of trying to find myself, nursing a fractured heart, and just struggling to find my footing in the world. I was isolated and deeply, profoundly vulnerable, though I did not have the words for it then. I was waiting, though I did not know it, for something to finally happen. That suffocating stillness, the sense of being trapped in the Dakota haze, stretched its long, quiet fingers deep into the summer of 2017. The monotony was no longer just a dull ache. It was a constant, pressing weight. The days were long and empty, marked only by the repetitive cycle of work at the hospital and the silent, mounting dread of my academic failures. I was 21 years old, and I felt as though my life had stalled completely, while everyone I knew was racing ahead. It was this profound, aching loneliness that finally pushed me to do something. It was an act of quiet, unseen rebellion, a secret I kept entirely to myself. I was desperate for something to change, for any kind of connection, even an artificial one, that existed outside the tiny, suffocating box of my life. I needed an escape hatch. So, I did what countless others my age were doing in their own moments of quiet desperation. I downloaded a dating application onto my phone. The act itself felt illicit, a small thrill in an otherwise gray existence. This was not about finding love. It was about exploration. It was about finding some version of myself that was not just a disappointed daughter or a failed pre-med student. It was a lifeline. I navigated this new digital space with a mix of curiosity and detachment, a tourist in a world I did not quite understand. And then, in this new world, I matched with someone. His profile was intriguing, but the single most important detail, the one that made me pause, was his location. He was currently living in San Diego, California. The name of the city alone felt like a mirage, a concept rather than a real place. California. It was the absolute antithesis of North Dakota. It was the symbol of everything my life was not: movement, energy, and the distant promise of a different world. The sheer distance was the appeal. It felt like a safety net, a thousands of miles long buffer. This was a very long-distance thing, which I reasoned with myself was entirely, completely harmless. It was just texting. It was just words on a screen. It was not real. It was an illusion of connection without any of the messy, terrifying risks of reality. He was a digital pen pal, a fantasy. I could be whoever I wanted to be in those little text boxes, and it could never touch my real, complicated life. Everyone my age was doing this, I told myself again, justifying the small jolt of excitement I felt. So, why not? I compartmentalized him, placing him firmly in the fantasy category. My real life, my real problems, continued. Then, as if the universe had suddenly decided to test the boundaries of my carefully constructed reality, a second, far more tangible opportunity emerged from the haze. It was an email, an official acceptance. I had been selected to attend a leadership retreat. The location was a university in Los Angeles, California. The news felt like a physical shock, a jolt of electricity that cleared my head for the first time in months. This was not a fantasy. This was real. This was validation. It was not just a trip, it was a leadership retreat. It meant that somewhere, someone saw potential in me. It was a confirmation that I was more than my math scores, more than the disappointment I saw reflected in my parents' eyes. I had rarely, if ever, traveled outside of North Dakota, and the idea of going so far, completely unsupervised and without my parents, was a terrifying and utterly thrilling prospect. A powerful feeling washed over me, something I had not allowed myself to feel in years. I was ecstatic. Oh my God, I whispered to myself, the words feeling foreign. Finally, freedom. This was it. This was the escape I had been craving, but it was a legitimate one. It was something I could be proud of. I felt like I was finally getting to do something real, something exciting, something that was entirely for me and my own future. For a brief, glorious moment, the weight of family obligation and academic failure lifted completely. I prepared for the trip with a new sense of purpose, my secret digital correspondence with the man in San Diego continuing in the background, a pleasant, harmless hum. He was part of my California fantasy, and I was about to step into my California reality. I had no idea, not the slightest inkling, that these two separate, parallel threads, the harmless illusion I was nurturing on my phone and the golden opportunity I was flying toward, were about to converge in a way that would shatter my entire world. The end of July found me immersed in the leadership retreat. I was, for the first time in my adult life, truly on my own, and the feeling was electric. It was more than just being unsupervised, it was a profound sense of anonymity. In this new space, I was not Anessa, the girl failing to get into medical school. I was not Anessa, the daughter bound by a web of unspoken cultural expectations. I was just a person existing, breathing in a new kind of air, and it felt like I was finally, truly living my best life. This new, intoxicating sense of liberation made me bold. One evening, caught up in the simple, uncomplicated joy of the day, I did something I rarely did with any real confidence. I posted on my social media account. It was not a plea for attention, but a simple declaration of existence, a small flag planted on a new shore. Hey, I wrote, I'm in California. It was an innocent broadcast, a message in a bottle tossed into the digital ocean from a place of newfound happiness. I had almost forgotten about the message when my phone chimed. It was him. The man from the dating application. The man from San Diego. My heart did not just leap, it seemed to stop completely for a second before restarting at a frantic pace. The digital mirage, the harmless fantasy I kept safely at a distance, was suddenly here. His message was direct. Hey, let's meet up. I didn't know you were in town. The fantasy was knocking on my door. This was the moment where the safe, compartmentalized illusion I had been nurturing was threatening to become real. A wave of caution, the voice of my North Dakota life, whispered that this was a bad idea. I was alone. I did not know this person. But another voice, the new, louder one that had been growing stronger all week, drowned it out. This was freedom. This was what living was. This was the kind of spontaneous, exciting thing that happened to people in stories. I was in California, and I was free. I said yes. It felt like a dream. The entire thing, this person, this attractive stranger from the app, was coming to pick me up. He was not just a collection of pictures and text. He was a real person, and he was on his way. He arrived, and the dreamlike quality of the moment solidified into something overwhelming. He pulled up not in a regular car, but in a Porsche. I knew nothing about cars, but I knew what this one signified. It was a machine that broadcasted status, wealth, and a life so completely removed from my own that it might as well have been from another planet. I felt a new, complicated rush of emotions. I had been so focused on his profile, on the checklist of his attributes, that this tangible display of success caught me off guard. He was not just good on paper, he was, it seemed, the real thing. As I got in, the unreality of it all washed over me again. I replayed his profile in my head, as I had done so many times before. It was just perfect. He was my religion. He was my ethnicity. He was my age. He had been student body president. He was Muslim. It was this last part, this shared foundation, that had made him feel safe in the first place. But stacked with everything else, it was staggering. It was not just a list of compatible traits, it was a list of accomplishments. He was the person I was supposed to be looking for. The person my family would have hand-picked. He was ambitious, a leader, approved of, and successful. It just felt like a dream come true that this kind of guy, this impossibly perfect person, was interested in me. Me. The girl from North Dakota. The girl who had done nothing, who had no exciting stories, whose entire life had been a straight line of study and obligation. I had never done anything fun. I had just studied my whole life, and even that I was failing at. And here I was, in this incredible car, with this incredible person. It was, without question, the craziest, most unbelievable, and most wonderful thing that had ever happened to me. I was completely and utterly captivated, not just by him, but by the entire fantasy he presented. The fantasy I had built in my mind, this perfect, successful, culturally aligned man, was so powerful that it cast a brilliant, blinding light over everything. I was sitting in his expensive car, still buzzing from the sheer unreality of it. He was charming, his voice smooth as he navigated the conversation, and I was just trying to keep up, trying to match his easy confidence, all while feeling my North Dakota smallness like a heavy coat I could not take off. He was the center of this new, glittering world, and for a few minutes he had made me feel like I could be a part of it. Then, perhaps 5 minutes into the drive, the entire atmosphere inside the car changed. He did not ease into it. He did not build a bridge of related topics. He simply cut through the casual chatter with a question that felt as sharp and as cold as a surgical instrument. In the middle of a sentence, he turned to me, his charming expression replaced by one of an intense, almost clinical curiosity. "So," he asked, his voice suddenly flat, "how many people have you been with?" The world just stopped. The sound of the engine, the feeling of movement, everything seemed to fade into a dull hum. I was certain I had misheard him. I stared at him, my mind scrambling to find a context for such a question. "What?" I managed to say, the word sounding small and breathless. He did not flinch. He did not look embarrassed for asking. He just watched me, his gaze steady, waiting. He was not asking to connect. He was asking to assess. He was an auditor, and I was suddenly, inexplicably, being subjected to an inspection. A hot, terrible wave of shame washed over me. This was not just a rude question. In my world, in my community, this was an impossible question. It was a topic so private, so taboo, that the very act of him asking it felt like a violation. It stripped me bare, made me feel transparent and deeply, profoundly judged. I felt a blush creep up my neck, a physical manifestation of my discomfort. What was the right answer? What was the answer he wanted to hear? Any answer felt like a trap. I tried to laugh it off, a strained, awkward sound. That's a really odd thing to ask someone you just met." He did not join the laugh. He just continued to wait, his silence a heavy, demanding presence. The pressure was immense. I was trapped in this car with this stranger who had just shattered every social boundary I knew. In a moment of pure panic, desperate to shift the intense, uncomfortable spotlight off of me, I deflected. I don't know," I fumbled. "What about you?" It was meant as a shield, but he took it as an invitation. The entire tense, clinical atmosphere vanished in an instant. He laughed. It was a breezy, effortless laugh, full of an easy confidence that stunned me. It was as if my question was the amusing, silly one, while his had been perfectly normal. "Oh," he said, waving his hand dismissively as he turned his attention back to the road. "So many girls." He said it with a casual pride, as if he were listing off cities he had visited or awards he had won. It was not a confession. It was a boast. I was so taken aback by his candor that I did not know what to say. He sensed my momentary shock, my quiet calculation. He glanced back at me, his smile fading just a fraction, and leaned in slightly, as if sharing a profound secret. But it doesn't matter. Right, he said, his voice dropping to a serious, almost righteous tone. God is forgiving. So, it doesn't matter. And there it was. The first chilling glimpse of his true logic. The contradiction was staggering. He had just subjected me to an intense, shaming interrogation about my past, but his own, which he openly admitted was extensive, was simply erased. It was forgiven. It did not matter. He had established, in less than 10 minutes, the fundamental rule of our dynamic. My past was a subject for scrutiny and judgment, while his was irrelevant. I just sat there, my mind trying to reconcile these two opposing ideas. I murmured, "Okay, okay." He sensed my confusion, my slight withdrawal, and just like that, the interrogation was over. The subject was closed. He had established his position. The charm switched back on as easily as a light. "Anyway," he said, his voice bright again, "let's go get some ice cream." What else could I do? I just nodded. To argue, to question his logic, would be to create a conflict. It would mean acknowledging the deep, unsettling weirdness of the entire exchange. I was not a person who created conflict. I was the girl from North Dakota who studied, who tried to please, who just wanted this magical, dreamlike evening to continue. So, we got ice cream. He was charming again. He talked about his university, his ambitions, and that perfect, impressive man from the first 5 minutes was back. But as I sat there, I felt a new cold knot in my stomach. The dream was no longer perfect. It now had a shadow, a tiny, dark spot I could not ignore. He dropped me back at the retreat center, and the drop-off was as perfect as the arrival. He was a complete gentleman. As I watched his car drive away, I was left utterly disoriented. I stood on the curb for a long time, trying to make sense of the whiplash. By the time I got back to my room, I was already rewriting the story. It was just a culture clash, I told myself. He's from California, they're just more direct here. He's just very religious, so he's serious about my past. That's a good thing, right? It means he's serious about me. I was already working, desperately, to make his behavior make sense. I was already making excuses for him. The texting continued, just here and there. I was consciously choosing to cling to the dream, to ignore the blaring alarm bell that had just sounded. I had passed his first, strange test by failing to challenge it. The casual texting that followed our first, strange meeting did not last long. My mind was still trying to process the whiplash of that night, the interrogation in the car, the jarring, contradictory logic about his past versus mine, and the way he had so smoothly papered over the entire incident with ice cream. I was confused, and a small new wall of caution had been built. Fast forward just a couple of days. He wanted to meet up again. My first instinct was hesitation. The unease from our drive was still fresh. But he proposed something different this time, something that instantly disarmed my new defenses. He suggested we meet in a group setting. This felt like a masterful correction, an unspoken acknowledgement that his one-on-one intensity might have been too much. A group felt safe. It felt normal. It implied friends, casualness, and a lack of pressure. It was, I thought, a perfect way to see him in a more natural light. The moment I arrived, however, I realized I had completely misunderstood the purpose of the group. They were not a buffer, they were a backdrop. From the second I walked in, he was, all of a sudden, all over me. This was not a crude or overly physical display. It was something far more potent and insidious. It was his complete, undivided, and absolute attention. He made me feel like I was the most important girl in the world. If I was in the middle of a sentence, he was hanging on every word. If someone else started to talk, his eyes would remain fixed on me. He was love-bombing me, and it was an overwhelming, intoxicating sensation. He was giving me all his attention, creating a powerful, invisible bubble around the two of us. The other people in the group faded into irrelevant, out-of-focus shapes. He was isolating me with his focus, making me feel so special. For a girl who had spent the last year feeling invisible, lost, and like a profound disappointment, this targeted adoration was not just flattering, it was like oxygen. The speed of this siege was breathtaking. The intensity did not just continue, it escalated at a rate I could not even process. Within the second day of me seeing him again, not the second date, but the second day of this renewed contact, he had taken me home to meet his mom. I was just floored. The suggestion itself was a shock. We were out, and he just casually said it as if it were the most normal thing in the world. My mind was racing, trying to find a footing. Meet his mom. Already, a small part of me recognized this as wildly unconventional. But my desire to be special, to be chosen, was so much stronger. The moment I walked into his house and was introduced, that small, cautious voice was silenced. Oh my God, I thought to myself, a thrill running through me. I'm so special. This was the proof. This was the ultimate validation. I already met his mom. He must really, really like me. This was not a game. This was not a fling. This man, this perfect, impressive man from my dreams, was serious. He was not just interested, he was claiming me. The rest of my short trip passed in this accelerated blur, a whirlwind of manufactured intimacy. By the time I was scheduled to fly back to North Dakota, only about 1 week after that first strange meeting, I had fallen completely head over heels for him. How could I not? The effort he had shown me was staggering. It was not just his mother. He had systematically, and with blinding speed, integrated me into his entire world. He introduced me to his cousin. He introduced me to his best friend. I had met them all already. He had created an entire foundation of a shared life in the span of a few days, not giving me a single moment to stop, to breathe, or to question the impossible velocity of it all. When I was going back to North Dakota, sitting on that plane, I felt a profound sense of loss. I felt like I had left a part of me in California. It had been a true whirlwind romance, a concept I had only ever seen in stories. It felt more real than my actual life. I had spent my entire existence in North Dakota. I had felt like I hadn't lived. And in 1 week, this person had given me a taste of a life that was exciting, passionate, and centered entirely on me. This was the first time I had done something outside of just studying and trying to get into a college and all that stuff. He had not just charmed me, he had captured me. I was leaving the fantasy to return to my gray reality, and I was already desperate to get back. My physical body was back in North Dakota, but my mind, my entire emotional core, remained tethered to California. The flat, endless plains that I had once found comforting now felt like a cage, a dull, gray reality compared to the vivid, high-definition life I had just tasted. The whirlwind romance did not slow down with the distance. If anything, it accelerated, compressing itself into the small, glowing screen of my phone. He had become my entire world. My phone was a lifeline. I lived for the good morning texts that arrived before I was even out of bed, and I stayed up far too late for the good night calls that left me too wired to sleep. He filled every empty space, every moment of my day that had once been occupied by loneliness or self-doubt. His attention was a constant, relentless hum. He was building our world, and it was just the two of us, a perfect, isolated unit. Within a span of only 2 weeks, 14 days from the moment I had left him, he had convinced me to be with him exclusively. It was not really a question or a discussion. It was a declaration, presented as the most natural, obvious fact in the world. "I'm not talking to anyone else, obviously," he'd said, "and I don't want you talking to anyone else either. This is serious." And I agreed. Of course, I agreed. This was it. This was the all-consuming love I had been waiting for. But exclusivity was not the finish line, it was just the first marker. The moment I agreed, he seamlessly moved to the next step. There was no pause, no time to just enjoy this new stage. His focus shifted immediately. "I need to meet your parents, Anessa," he stated. It was not a request, it was a plan. A cold jolt of reality, the first one I'd felt in weeks, shot through me. This was North Dakota. This was a traditional family. This was not California. Introducing someone to my parents was not a casual step. It was a signal of intent, a formal declaration. I tried, gently, to apply the brakes. "You know what?" I replied, my voice hesitant, as I tried to find the words. "That seems That seems like a little fast. I'm not sure why you want to do this all of a sudden. We just made this official. His reaction was not anger. It was something far more effective. He did not argue with my logic. He dismissed it entirely by reframing the entire situation. He did not address my practical concern, it's fast. Instead, he pivoted to the spiritual. And that is when his version of religion, which had been a subtle, sweet melody in the background, began to play a central, suffocating role in our scenario. My hesitation, he implied, was not practical. It was a sign of a weak commitment. Our conversations, which had been full of laughter and future plans, began to take on a new, solemn weight. He started to talk about our path, about righteousness, and about sin. It was a tactic. It was a dark, manipulative pattern that started to emerge, and it was devastatingly effective. He would always force something physically. During our late-night calls, the conversation would turn intimate. He would push, he would press, he would use his words to move us past boundaries. I was too weak, too confused, or too infatuated to defend. He would initiate things, and I, caught in the headlights of his intense, overwhelming desire, would follow. Then, in the moments just after, when a confusing, complicated mix of regret and nervous excitement had settled over me, he would strike. The shift was immediate and brutal. The passionate voice would vanish, replaced by one of grave, profound disappointment, not in me, but in us. "Well, see," he would say, his voice thick with a carefully crafted guilt. "We just sinned." He let the word hang in the air between us, a shared contamination. He was not the instigator, and I was not the participant. We were a single unit that had failed. He was using my own faith, my own deep-seated moral code, as a cage. He had created the transgression, and now he was making me a co-conspirator in the guilt. He would let me sit in that shame. He would talk about how he was struggling to be righteous for me, for us, and then he would present his solution. It was the only solution. "Anessa, we can't keep doing this," he would say, his voice now strong, like a man who had found the answer. "We can't keep failing. Would you rather just not do that anymore?" The unspoken answer was clear. The only way to stop this sinning was to make our relationship legitimate. The only way to fix the problem he had created was to rush into the solution he was demanding. His religious coercion was a masterpiece. He had taken my hesitation, "It's too fast," and turned it on its head. He argued that we were not moving fast enough. Our sin was a direct result of our unmarried status. Therefore, the only righteous, God-fearing thing to do was to accelerate. And in my naive brain, in my desperate, all-consuming desire for this dream to be real, the manipulation started to make sense. His warped logic became my own. I wasn't being rushed, I was being saved. He wasn't being controlling, he was being righteous. I completely fell for it. The problem was no longer his alarming speed or his total disregard for my boundaries. The problem, as he had so brilliantly defined it, was our sin. The solution was a ring, a ceremony, a blessing. I accepted his premise. The conversation was no longer if he should meet my parents, but how soon. And so, by September, he had achieved his goal. He had convinced me. He was coming to North Dakota. He was coming to meet my parents and, in his mind, to seal our fate. He arrived in September, exactly as he had orchestrated. The fact that he was here, breathing the quiet North Dakota air, stepping into the small, unchanged world of my childhood, felt like the ultimate validation. This was not a digital mirage, this was real. He had flown across the country, a tangible, physical manifestation of his seriousness. In the first moments of that visit, as I watched him greet my parents, I was not just happy. I was triumphant. I was ecstatic. This was the moment that proved my whirlwind, my California dream, was not a foolish girl's fantasy. It was real, and here he was, ready to prove it. His performance was flawless. He was the man from the Porsche, the student body president, the perfect, charming suitor, all refined and respectful for my family. He shook my father's hand firmly. He smiled at my mother with a warmth that seemed to radiate. He was polite, attentive, and he said all the right things. I was bursting with pride, watching him win them over. My parents, however, were not so easily enchanted. They were kind, of course. They were welcoming, as they always were. But as the first evening wore on, I could feel a subtle shift in the air. It was not anything they said. It was not a specific action. It was a quiet, shared hesitation. It was a watchfulness. When I was in the room, they were polite and engaged, but I would catch them, just for a fraction of a second, observing him when they thought I was not looking. It was a polite, measured distance, a quiet reservation that I, in my loved-up haze, found deeply frustrating. This was not the enthusiastic approval I had craved. It was a hesitant observation. Their unspoken caution felt like a criticism, not of him, but of me. I felt a defensive wall rise inside me. They just did not know him. They had not experienced the whirlwind, the intensity, the way he made me feel. I dismissed their unease as simple, old-fashioned parental caution. But as the days of his visit unfolded, even I could not ignore the cracks that were beginning to show. The man my parents saw at the dinner table was not the man I was alone with in the in-between moments. When he was away from their watchful eyes, when we were alone in my car or in the privacy of the guest room, a different side of him began to emerge. The prying started again. The velvet inquisition from our first date returned, but this time it was not driven by curiosity. It felt like a relentless investigation. He was prying into my past quite a bit. It was as if he was on a mission to map out every interaction, every friendship, every moment of my life before him. He wanted names. He wanted details. He wanted to know about old classmates, about guys I had been friends with in college, about pictures he found in old albums in my room. And this prying was not just for information, it was for ammunition. With his questions came the shaming. He would seize on the smallest, most innocent detail, a photo of me at a college event with a group, including other young men. "Why were you standing so close to him?" he would demand, his voice low. A text message from an old friend. "Why is a guy texting you? You should not be in contact with him." He shamed me. He shamed me about my life. He shamed me for having a past that did not include him. An intense, possessive jealousy was just taking over in his mind. He was retroactively applying his rules to a life I had lived long before I knew he existed. He made me feel dirty, foolish, and disloyal for things that had been completely innocent. He was establishing, moment by moment, his complete and total ownership. I saw a lot of negative behaviors. At that time, everything was still verbal. But the change in his tone was frightening. The jealousy, the controlling questions, and then the yelling had started. It happened in the car. It was sudden, a shocking, disproportionate explosion of rage over something I considered minor. I might have laughed at a text, or he did not like the way I answered a question. His voice would become sharp, hard, and loud. It was a cold, cutting anger that left me stunned and shaking. He would accuse me of being disrespectful, of hiding things, of not taking him seriously. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the rage would vanish. He would regain his composure. He would become calm, rational, perhaps even apologetic, but his apology was just another form of control. He would blame his outburst on his passion, on how much he cared, or, more often, on me. He had only yelled because I had provoked him, because I was not being completely transparent. I was caught in a terrifying spin cycle. I would sit at the dinner table, still trembling from an outburst that had happened only minutes before, and watch him laugh and charm my mother. The dissonance was profound. It made me question my own reality. Did that just happen? Am I the one who is crazy? I was already too invested. I was already defending the man I wanted him to be, not the man who was sitting next to me, quietly building my cage. I told myself this was just the stress of the visit. I told myself this was just passion. I was desperate to believe that the man my parents were seeing, the charming, perfect man, was the real one, and this private, angry, controlling shadow was just a fleeting anomaly. I did not know, I could not have known, that the shadow was the only real thing. The time between September and November was filled with a growing, insistent pressure from him. He had met my parents, and in his mind, the path was now clear. He convinced them to let me visit him in California, a feat I still find difficult to comprehend. Picture this. A traditional Muslim household agreeing to let their youngest daughter fly across the country to visit a man she was not yet married to. It was just an impossible scenario. I did not know how he was going to convince my parents, but he found a way. He essentially got his parents to convince my parents, framing it as a family visit. I would be going to visit his family, staying in their home. The arrangement felt proper, official, and my parents, still holding on to their reservations but swayed by the involvement of other adults, reluctantly agreed. So I went. Not long after I arrived, he took us on what he described as a very long hike. The whole time, his demeanor from the September visit was back, but sharper. He was kind of bullying me. "Hurry up, Anessa," he would call back, his voice impatient. "Like, you're falling behind. Like you're so out of shape. You need to hurry up and get to the top." I just grit my teeth and said, "Okay," trying to keep up, feeling humiliated and exhausted. We finally did get to the top. There was this one area, a piece of rock that jutted out over an edge. If you looked down, it felt like the ground was miles away. It was so high up, I was getting dizzy just being near it. I have a terrible phobia of heights, something he was aware of, and for some reason, he was forcing me to get onto that specific piece of rock. "No, no, no," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm okay, okay, okay." I was freaking out, backing away, but he was insistent, grabbing my hand, pulling me forward. Finally, he got me on that rock. I was trembling, my entire body rigid with terror. I felt like I was about to fall off the rock and die. I was so scared. And in that moment, as I stood there, paralyzed by my phobia, he got down on one knee. He proposed to me. I was completely blindsided. Mind you, I also looked terrible. I was sweating from the hike, my hair was a mess, and I was in the middle of a full-blown panic attack. No girl wants to be proposed to like that. It was the worst way possible, because it was all for a show, it was all for the picture, for the performance. It was never for me, for what I wanted as an individual. I am a person who hates heights, who hates hikes. The entire event was not tailored towards me in any way. Suddenly, I was aware of other people. Everyone around us started clapping. The sound pulled me out of my terror, replacing it with this big, confusing high. I did not know he was going to propose. He proposed. And honestly, despite the fear, despite the manipulation and the humiliation of the hike, I just felt like I was on top of the world. The grand gesture, the public spectacle, had worked. It overshadowed everything else. The high of the proposal, that confusing, manufactured feeling of being on top of the world, carried me through the next day or two. I was engaged. It felt official, a solid step toward the legitimate life he had pushed for. The terror on the rock, the humiliation of the hike, I filed those things away as part of the crazy story I would one day tell. Then, within a day or two of me getting engaged, the illusion cracked open. We were in his car, just the two of us. The atmosphere was casual, relaxed. He was looking through my phone, something that had become a normal, if slightly uncomfortable, occurrence. He was scrolling, and then he stopped. He had found a picture. It was an old photo of me with one of my guy friends from my past, from long before I even knew he existed. His entire body tensed. "Who is this?" he asked. The question was quiet, but tight, all the warmth gone from his voice. "Oh," I said, trying to sound casual, though my heart had already started to beat faster. "This is just like one of my friends from my past. Why do you have this picture of this guy on your phone?" he demanded. His voice was rising, the quiet menace turning into something sharp and accusatory. "I don't talk to this guy," I said, the words tumbling out. "It was just something in the past, long before you." He got so enraged. It was like a switch had been flipped. Before I could even process the change, he took my head in his hand and he bashed it against his car window. The sound, the sharp, hard impact, and the sudden explosion of pain stunned me into silence. He then threw my phone down, violently, and left the car, slamming the door. I just sat there, my head throbbing, my mind completely blank with shock. The shock was a cold, paralyzing thing. I did not know how long I sat there. The next thing I knew, he had taken me into his apartment. The rage was gone, replaced by something just as intense, but entirely different. He got on his knees. He was holding my legs, clinging to me, his head bowed. He was saying my name over and over. "Anessa, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for doing that to you." He was crying, not just quiet tears, but deep, heaving sobs. He was begging on his knees. What you can expect with begging looks like, that is what he was doing. He was just on my knee, his voice thick, just saying, "I'm so sorry. This will never happen again." He swore to me, "It'll never get worse than this." I realized the gravity of my mistakes. He tied it back to our recent engagement. "You know, we had just gotten engaged. Please, please give this a try." And I fell for it. As everyone does, I fell for it completely. I wanted to see the good in him. I wanted to believe that this was the aberration, not the man himself. I forced my mind to remember how good the first 2 or 3 weeks were. I clung to the memory of that first month, that whirlwind, that feeling of being so special. I began to rationalize what he had done. I told myself that any man would get jealous. Any man would be angry if he thought I had guy friends or that there was a guy in my past. I mean, it makes total sense that he got mad. I reasoned with myself. Sure, he got a little bit too mad, but you know what? I think I could forgive him. Maybe we could learn from this. Maybe this was the breaking point we needed to move forward, stronger. I chose to believe the performance. The wedding happened. The momentum of the engagement, combined with his performance of remorse, carried us forward. But even on our wedding day, the hypocrisy was staggering. He had a really good female friend at that time, a friend he had insisted on me inviting, a friend he had forced me to make a bridesmaid. I did it just to keep the peace. I remember we were all taking a picture, and he leaned over and gave her a kiss on the cheek. I just remember thinking, I cannot even have a picture of a male friend on my phone, but you just kissed this girl on the cheek on our wedding day. The disparity was stark, but I said nothing. Later that night, at the Airbnb, I went upstairs, overcome. He came after me, and I started getting almost violent, pushing him away, yelling, screaming. He had created this version of me, pushing me to such limits that I would lose control. He brought out the crazy in me, and then I felt crazy because I was the one screaming. I felt like I was the one doing him wrong. He just stood there, so calm. In January of 2018, I had moved in with him and his family. They lived in this massive mansion in California. Life settled into a strange, tense routine. Every few days, there were instances. I would be on his phone and I would notice a girl was messaging him. I would read the messages in front of him, my voice shaking. "I'm not flirting," he would say, his tone flat. "This is just how I talk to girls. Like, these are my female friends. You just commented on her body," I would argue, saying how nice it is when she dances. "I'm just complimenting her," he would shoot back. "You need to stop being so insecure." Then, about 2 weeks in, I got the message. It was an anonymous message on Instagram. This person had made a blank Instagram account, no posts, no followers. They had messaged me privately. The words burned into my screen. "Hey, before it's too late, please don't get married to this guy. He used to abuse my friend physically." I just remember chills running down my spine, a cold, sharp fear. I immediately texted my sister. "Hey, I just got this message. I'm freaking out. Like, what if it's true?" I went back downstairs, visibly shaken. After his friends, who were visiting, finally left, I asked him about the message. He was so calm. He barely reacted. He just goes, "It's probably some jealous ex. Don't even pay any mind to it." I would never do that to anybody. I was so relieved by his coolness. I thought, oh, he's so casual about this. It must be somebody who's just trolling him, whatever. I let it go. I believed him. That very same day, the day of the warning, had been a really great day. His friends had been over, we had laughed, and for a few hours, things felt normal, happy. The fear from the message had faded, dismissed as a troll, just as he said. That evening, we were laying down in bed. I was tired, content from the good day, and I had fallen asleep. I woke up to pure terror. I was being strangled. His hands were completely around my neck, and I could not breathe. I just remember waking up, trying to gasp for air. His face was not his face. He had this look on, a look of pure, cold rage, like he wanted to murder me. He kept saying, "I saw your text messages. I know who you've been talking to." I was gagging, trying to speak, trying to understand. "What are you talking about?" I rasped. But I could not breathe. He was squeezing tighter. "There's so many stuff in your past that you haven't told me about," he hissed. "Well, before we met, you had been talking to this one guy, and you never told me about this guy." He was talking about something from before I even knew him. My whole response, my only thought was, what do I need to say to get out of this situation? I was fighting for my life. I was trying to squeeze out the words, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He finally let go of my neck. I collapsed, gasping for air, my throat burning. He showed me the messages on my phone, messages from a past I thought was mine alone. I just kept saying, I'm so sorry, like I didn't tell you about this. And at that time, he just went harder. The apology meant nothing. He gave me a black eye. He punched me in the gut. He threw me against the wall. And after all that, after he had finally exhausted his rage, he calmed down. He just stopped. He exited the room, leaving me on the floor. For a second, I just lay there, trying to process what exactly just happened. My body ached. My mind was screaming. Do I run right now? Do I stay? What do I do? I am in his town, his city, his house, with his parents downstairs. Do I run to his parents? What do I do? I went into the bathroom. The person in the mirror was not me. There were a lot of popped blood vessels on my eye. My neck was covered in scratches and deep, dark bruising. It was just, for me at that time, it just felt so horrific. I somehow managed to walk downstairs. I sat down at the kitchen table. His mom was there, making me breakfast. She sat down beside me, and we were talking, just small talk. She did not notice it at first. At this time, he had already left the kitchen table and gone back upstairs. I was just sitting there, and we were talking, and then she did a couple of takes. She did a double take at me, her eyes narrowing. She said, "What happened to your eye?" Before she could even finish the question, she kind of gasped. She realized. She knew. Who else would do this to me? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Did he do this to you? I did not say anything. I could not. I just kind of looked down at my plate, holding back tears, and I just kept trying to eat my food. Then she called over his stepdad. Do you see what your son did? Oh my God. They called him downstairs. They started yelling at him, yelling for me. Why would you do this? And he goes, well, he did not really take full accountability. In his mind, he truly believed that I deserved this. They forced him to apologize. He said the words, but they were empty. I just really felt like they had my back. I was like, this is amazing. I thought, thank God I spoke up because these people have my back. But I was having a lot of moral turmoil. Do I stay? Let me give it this one more chance. Then, his mom had the most brilliant, horrifying idea. She said, the best way to get through this is if you guys go back and sleep in the same bed again tonight. I just stared at her. That is a weird approach. He just strangled me last night. You want me to go in the same bed as him? But I was trapped, so I said, we'll give it a try. I was really struggling with what he did. Later, I told him, I don't feel like there was enough remorse for what you did. And he doubled down. He looked at me, his eyes cold, and said, Anessa, honestly, I felt like you deserved it at the time. That night, I told my mother-in-law, hey, like I actually do want to go visit Austin right now. I needed to see my family. She immediately shut it down. You can't visit Austin right now, she said. You have too many injuries. Everyone's going to think the worst. This is going to get out of hand. You have to at least heal before you go back to visit your family. I felt completely stuck. On the one hand, my mother-in-law was posing, acting like she cared about me. And on the other hand, I felt like I needed to get out. I needed to get out for my safety. I just had to convince her. Hey, I said, trying to sound calm. I'm going to leave all my stuff here. I promise you, if there's any misunderstanding, I'll squash it. I just really need to go see my family. She finally, reluctantly, agreed. But he came on the flight with me back to Austin, Texas the next day. I brought one tiny little suitcase. I left all my belongings in California, not knowing if I was going to come back or not. But the plan I sold them was that I was coming back. I got to Austin. It was nighttime, so no one could really see my face. My parents were there, and my sister, her husband, and their 7-month-old daughter. We got in the car. My sister was not talking to me the entire car ride home. She was just completely not talking to me. She was silent. My family was talking to me, talking to my abuser. They were having a grand time, so happy that we came back to visit them. We got back into the apartment. They were all sitting down, talking, and my sister just went straight to her room. I just slowly followed behind her. She was laying down on the bed, and she looked at me. Her voice was quiet but hard. "Let me see your face." I showed her my face. It does not take rocket science. She saw what happened. Her eyes filled with a terrifying calm. "He did this to you?" I just nodded. I could not speak. And immediately, the fire in her eyes, the anger. My mom heard her start to yell, and she came in. She goes, "What happened?" And honestly, this is the most heartbreaking part. My mom witnessing what had happened to me, even thinking back to it, I get so sad. Her heart just broke in an instant, because she had trusted that guy too, as much as I did, and she just immediately started blaming herself. "This is my fault, this is my fault. I should have prevented this. I shouldn't have gotten you married. I should have seen the signs. This is my fault." She was taking all the weight of the responsibility onto her. She said that she did this to me, that she did not protect me. Within the next 10 minutes, he was out the door. My family had kicked him out. Luckily, my family had my back. They were my fortress. They prevented me from going back, changed my number, they took my phone. I had a decision to make, either move back to North Dakota with my parents or stay in Austin and live in my sister's 2-bedroom apartment with their newborn. I chose to stay in Austin. I slept on their couch for about 3 months. He got served with a restraining order on Valentine's Day of 2018. After that, thankfully, there were no more emails, no more harassment on his end. And that is when I finally started to heal. I started going to meditation retreats. I started painting. I would just sit in my sister's house for months. Every day I would just paint something new because I felt like I was losing it. I was taking exams every day. I was taking antidepressants. I was sleeping through the day, having panic attacks. I was a wreck. My family did every single thing they could. They put me into therapy. They started giving me medications. They put me into meditation groups. They forced me to go out and paint, get new hobbies. I started dancing. I am not a dancer, but I started dancing. I started working at a hospital again as a phlebotomist, and I was taking classes at a community college to try to get into a master's program. 10 months after I had filed for divorce and filed a police report, they found him. They had actually found him and they had arrested him. It took 10 months. 10 months of me not knowing where he was. Was he going to find me? What was he going to do? How was my life going to be affected? It took 10 months, and the authorities called me saying that they had arrested him and found him. They were finally going to start the charging process. In the middle of me talking in court, I did peer over at him. I just could not help it, and he had this smirk on his face. He was just nodding his head, gaslighting me with just his face. After the whole court proceeding, another month passed. This was April 8th of 2019. This is the day I remember specifically. The authorities called me saying that the case was over. He had taken a plea deal. He had pled guilty to 2 felony counts on my behalf. I was definitely disappointed a little bit because he did not get any jail time. They just let him off with a plea deal. But at the end of the day, I was still very proud of myself that at least, a felony does affect an individual's life. I was able to use my platform to not only help other women live a life free from this, but specifically to help the women who were currently being affected by him. Because I found out this guy is living the same perpetual cycle. Finding a woman, marrying her, abusing her. He was obsessed with having multiple wives. He thought it was his right as a Muslim man to have multiple wives. Meanwhile, he was hiding wife from wife. He was doing everything illegally. He just loved the power trip of it all. Thank you for following this journey with me. It is not an easy story to tell, but it is an important one. We will see you again next time.